Hello there. Today I'm talking about A Night to Remember, the Titanic film that's the best Titanic film by a mile. you know, it's the film that inspired the Titanic James Cameron film. He was pretty upfront about he got inspired by seeing this film and thinking, what if we put a romantic story in the middle of this, which is something that people have done forever. So it wasn't even a new thought. But this is the one that doesn't do that. This is the one that's just a docudrama story. Now, Graham Manby Film did a video on this about 2 weeks ago, so you can go and watch his video too, because it's a very good video. Great minds think alike or something, because I watched the film and then he'd put his video up, and it was like, oh, well, guess we're both doing this film. Yeah, but the Night to Remember is the Titanic film I saw first. To me, it's still the best one, even though there's historical inaccuracies now, which we didn't know at the time, which was that the Titanic went in two rather than down all as one. But that was something, it'd been a bit of dispute for a while until they found a wreck. Some people said it's split, and other people said no, it went fully down. And it just depends on what people remembered, but we now know the truth. So this film went by the thing of it went down on what is one, but it didn't. So that's the historical flaw that you have to accept. But beyond that, the film is terrific. The film is really terrific and does so much more, I think, than the Cameron film does, because it doesn't have that annoying romance. The sense of romance, I just don't need. I think actually the empty romance in Titanic film is it takes away from the tragedy of all these people. You centralise everything towards these two people rather than showing the tragedy of all these people dying. I think it takes away a lot. And the strength of this film is that there's not one central character. I mean, the closest you get is Kenneth Moore as the guy who's like the third in command, who manages to get off the ship ultimately at the end, and he survives it. But he's not the central. He's the kind of character you see certain things through his eyes, but he's not the central character. You've got characters through the different layers of the ship, from the bottom to the top classes. You've got crew from other ships around nearby, one of whom who never sees, who's very close by and could have picked people up but never got the signal because the person had gone to bed, basically. And no one believed Titanic would sink anyway, and they thought it was just some. They couldn't see it because there's a theory now because of the way the light was with the cold, that the visibility was weird that night just by the temperatures, and they just thought it was some ship had stopped the night that they had. They didn't realise it was too far away to realise it was sinking. And there's another ship that actually got the communication and travelled all the way to try and get them, and arrived 2 hours later. So you get all of that as well. You get the tragedy of all the things they're trying to do to get people off the ship and try to get other ships nearby to get to Titanic. Because Titanic wasn't the shipping lane. I mean, it wasn't wildly off the different routes to get over the Atlantic. It wasn't a shipping lane, so they should have. It's as close to other ships as you could possibly get. And the film takes time to show all the details about that. The idea of there's other ships nearby. It's not in isolation. Logically it should have been picked up. There was lifeboats, but not enough. But if this other ship had seen it, it would have been a lot more people saved. So that's part of the tragedy. And the frustration of watching this film saying, will you just please notice this other ship? You're watching it getting frustrated with them. And that just pays off beautifully. I mean, it's also just the fact that it's slow escalation. I mean, this film, they hit the iceberg about 30 minutes in. The first third is the setup, but the first third also has them hitting the iceberg. And then after that, we're going into the second act. But the iceberg itself is a bit styrofoamish. Because I watched this projected, and you can see the styrofoam. There are some special effects that do not hold up, that were done well before Britain got good at special effects with things like 2001. That's the stuff where you could see that some of the boats were just these little people and the rows were moving. just one of those things. They should have used mats and actually had like actors in the background stuff that they did in the later film. They just tried something that didn't work. But the actual Titanic ship model looks pretty good. I mean, you know it's a model, but it looks pretty good. And they do a lot of really good angles with it. And as long as you suspend disbelief, you're fine. But there are some shots there, though, when they're hitting the iceberg and things. That looks a bit dodgy. But that's not the point. The thing is, Roy Ward Baker directed this, and he's a director who did some good stuff and some bad stuff. But he was a classically trained director. So things like this and Quatermass in the Pit and things like that, we showed him at his best. And he was at his best when he was dealing with actors rather than special effects. Because he relies on close-ups of actors reacting to sell the tragedy rather than trying to put it on special effects. That's what he's really good at. He shows the effects, but he also shows the reaction to people, and that's what's really getting you going. And the little reactions here or there that sell a lot. And if you've seen Titanic, you will see lots and lots of things that happen the same. There's certain things they do to indicate the ship going down that James Cameron did take. And it's like, well, why wouldn't he? I mean, I'm sure there's been some complaints like why he stole way too much from this film. It's like, well, they did it perfect. If you're doing another film, Titanic, and you're doing your own take on it, but there's another film that has done so much stuff exactly the way it should be done, why wouldn't you just pay homage to it and say, yeah, we're doing that? It's like, that's the best way to do it, obviously. Just do that. So I don't think it's stealing. I think it's just a case of a director saying, yeah, they figured that out. Like, why would I try and do something different? It's like 2/3 of the film, these two films are different because they're different genres ultimately. One's a realistic genre and one's a romance. But you've got to Craig Cameron who actually looked and goes, yeah, we're doing that because that's the way you do it. That's just logically. Like any sane director would do that and go, yeah, we're doing that. That's like the whole thing with the trolleys rolling and the guys in the ship playing, the band still playing as the Titanic, just before Titanic goes down. And just a lot of nuances of people waiting who are not going to go down with this, who realise they're doomed, so they're going to try and die with dignity. Lots of stuff like that they work better in this film for me because there's so many characters. And they're just a snippet of different classes of how different people react to dying, who know they're going to die. I think it worked better in this film. But you got Craig Cameron who just said, yeah, that works. It's like, why would I not do that? So, I mean, there's some people say it's ripped off. I think Titanic paid a lot of homage to this film. There was respect for this film in Titanic. Like, they obviously respected how well this film was put together. You know, I don't think it was trying to get in over on you. I think it was like, yeah, we're going to pay respect to this other film that actually did it right. We're doing a different type of film, but this did it right, so we're going to pay homage to them. So there was that element of respect for this film because it's so well done. And there's certain characters like the drunken cook as well that's wonderfully done, and they take that in the new film. And there's lots of shots of people climbing up as the Titanic's going down, which would happen anyway, and it does feel like they're as reminiscent, but it's like, that happened too, so there's no way to avoid that. I mean, I'm not talking about those things, I'm talking about the actual just little details that they definitely paid homage to. And they definitely did a lot of respect for this film. But what the film really does is the spread of people throughout, from the other ships to this Titanic ship. Now, you don't get that much of the captain in this film. You see him enough and see him giving orders, and he's viewed as a serious man. They don't give you other details of why he was a bit of a lunatic as well. Historically, this guy trashed I think it was a sister ship of Titanic, or Titanic itself when it was going out. There was some reason for the delay that was his fault because he was a bit of a speed freak on these ships. And Titanic was meant to do this crossing earlier, because this captain had messed it up, that had to cross the Atlantic later, which if they'd done it earlier, they wouldn't have crashed. It's just that thing is like, so I mean, and he was trying to break a record, but they don't really go into that. It's like, we don't need that. That's not the tragedy. This guy went down with the ship ultimately. He paid his price, but they don't actually go into that details. It's much more about tragedy than anything else. And Kenneth Moore's really good in this because he's an actor who's not a star. He's a British star, which means he's a kind of supporting actor in American stakes of filmmaking. But that's perfect for this film, as you need someone who can keep attention, but is not going to demand attention and take away all the energy of the film to him. He's just going to be there and being a stalwart character, see the tragedy of what's happening, and try and do his best in a bad situation. You got a young David McCallum on the radio as well. It's quite interesting to see him as so young. You've got a bunch of other character actors whose faces you might recognise from British films of that period. There's lots of faces you'll recognise. Now, there's some really good characters like the gambler who realises he's done for and goes back and just plays patience basically while he's waiting to die. There's other characters who are like older men who realise they're getting their wives off. They're getting their wives and children off, and they know they're going to go down, and it's like, well, we're going to go down with dignity. Like, I can see where this is going, and it's not good for me. Some of the older guys who are just like, well, I'm not going to survive anyway, so why even try? It's like, it's freezing out there, I'm not going to survive, so why not get the women and children off? So you get lots of bits of British dignity under stress that is a bit out of fashion now, but it is well done. You get a sense of these guys who are rich and who realise luck's going against them. They're going to die here, and that's it. And there's the dignity of that. There's another one where there's a younger guy who's got a family, and he's trying to say, yeah, I'll go off somewhere else, even though he knows he's not going to make it. And he tries his best to make it, but he dies. And it's like so moving because it's like he's making sure his family get off, and he's trying. He does all the right stuff. He does go and ask someone, is this really serious? And he keeps stiff upper lip to try and get everyone off. But he's giving hints to his wife, like, this is really serious. You need to make sure you get all these kids off now. And she plays along with him to make sure the kids are fine and don't realise the gravity of the situation. Some of that stuff is great. You've got the poors on the third class trying it up, which the Cameron did take in Titanic as well. And some of them actually make it. And it's well done. It's like, it's not as expansive as in the Cameron film because of a limited budget. But it works. It shows you how everything's stacked against anyone who wasn't rich and a woman, really, ultimately, or a child. If you're a rich child or woman, you're fine. If you're anyone else, you are in trouble. If you're a crew, the crew were having to put these people out onto ships and knowing that they would probably die. And it tells that without really pushing it in too much. It's like, you just know these guys are going to die. And that's wonderfully done. There's so much stuff that's wonderfully done. And as you notice, I'm not talking about the scale of anything. Because the scale's there. But it's a low budget film, so they can only do so much. But they focus on the details, like getting these ships down, getting people out safe. What does it mean to the people? It's about close-ups, about looks between people. Things like that. It's cut between different locations to get a sense of the breadth of the tragedy. And it's when once they hit iceberg, about half an hour in, the rest of the film is the slow escalation of dread. You know, as things get worse and worse. And then finally when the ship goes down, it's like surviving in the cold water. And when you stick with Kenneth Moore, who's a character who survives, and he slowly pulls everyone else together to try and make sure that as many survive as possible. And not everyone survives. Even people on the boat die of cold. So there's tons of great stuff in this. So if you're looking for a film about the tragedy, rather than romance, just the pure tragedy, this is it. You got to accept it was made in the 50s, so the effects aren't the greatest, but it doesn't matter because it was so well directed and so well written and so well acted that it doesn't matter. ultimately. A few effects shots aren't great because you get the full feeling of it all, even within this limited budget and limited, effects, because they don't have the budget. I mean, if they had a bigger budget, some of those effects would be better. It's just that they didn't have the budget. And Britain was still learning how to do that. I mean, America was learning how to do these effects at that point. I mean, these special effects didn't really start to come in until the 50s. And that was America. We didn't really start doing effects in Britain till really the 60s when you got international productions, co-productions, and Kubrick was coming over and doing his films. But for the 50s, it was all shot in America or Spain or something. It was really the 60s that British film production really took off, and we learned all these techniques. So you have to take that into account. But this is a wonderful film. There's multiple versions of the Blu-ray out there. Yeah, Imprint just did a new one. So there's no excuse not to see this film. You can probably see it in streaming as well. This is a film you should see. It's so good. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and that's me for now. So bye.